Welcome to yet another fabulous episode of Spatry's Cup of Linux, and this is the Linux Zoo crew. We have an exciting episode for you all today. This will be a free-form discussion on Arch Linux questions and answers. And before I begin, I'd like to take this time to introduce our speakers. We have Andy Arch, I have Lixer, the Arch Noob, and Timmy. And we have a whole bunch of people in the listening room who are going to be shouting out their questions to us. And this is just a friendly reminder that you can voice those comments, questions, and suggestions in IRC. My panel will be monitoring the communications, and we will be discussing your ideas. Now, since this is a beginner's discussion on Arch, I thought I'd take the time to give the definition of what Arch Linux really is. Arch Linux is an independently developed general-purpose GNU Linux distribution, versatile enough to suit any role. Development focuses on simplicity, minimalism, and code elegance. Arch is installed as a minimal base system configured by the user upon which their own ideal environment is assembled by installing only what is required or desired for their unique purposes. GUI configuration utilities are not officially provided, and most system configuration is performed from the shell by editing simple text files. Based on a rolling release model, Arch strives to stay bleeding edge and typically offers the latest stable versions of most software. Now that definition is provided from the Arch Wiki itself, and that is exactly what Arch is. I have been using Arch Linux now for 2 months, and I can say that it was a little bit of a headache in the beginning. However, it has actually been a wonderful experience because it has allowed me to build my own system. It's a do-it-yourself enthusiast operating system and allowed me to learn what makes Linux really tick. And now that I have my Arch system set up how I want it, pretty much keeping it maintained is a breeze. Andy Arch, why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience with Arch?
My experience with Arch is that it's a total different learning experience for me than me in regular Linux. And I've been using Arch for the past few weeks or two. It took me a couple of times to install it and get my system up and running. And if I wouldn't have not known, I had to read the documentation first. You need anyone that using Arch has to read the documentation first before they make a transition to Arch, or they may break their system.
Lixer, why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience with Arch and how it's enriched your computing experience?
All right. My experience with Arch is, it's been pretty well. I've been using Arch for around a month or more, and it's been really good so far. I was originally playing with Arch Linux in VirtualBoxes last year, but I never actually threw it to the metal, so this year I just decided to throw Arch on my actual machine, and I gotta say, it's actually pretty nice. It runs great, it's fairly stable, and it's just a champion, man. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, and that is the nice thing about Arch. I mean, it just keeps working and it works well. And the thing is, there is minimal breakage and that sort of thing on updates that I've noticed now that I have the system configured and working the way that I want it to. Okay, the Arch Noob. He's not really much of a noob, I don't think. He seems pretty knowledgeable to me. Please tell me about your experiences, Arch Noob.
Well, hello there, Spat, and I guess you could not call me a noob, but and again, I want you to look at it like this. They say that Arch is a rolling release distribution. Well, that means something new happens every day. So, in fact, how can you not be a noob if something new happens every day? But as far as my overall experience goes, I have been playing with Arch for shy of a year. I didn't get really serious about it until about a month, maybe a month and a half ago, when I decided to make the commitment. And within a month, I have uninstalled and reinstalled probably some 40 times, give or take. But that wasn't because of anything that Arch did. That was because of its complexity through simplicity, that I wish to learn more about Arch and its inner workings. So one time I would install KDE, one time I would install XFCE, LXDE, GNOME 3, and then I would install, Cinnamon. And it was just really something that I wanted to do and wanted to experience. To me, you learn Arch, you experience it. So I call myself the Arch noob because, in fact, we're all noobs when it comes to Arch.
What a wonderful way of putting it. And interestingly enough, I installed it 13 times. This was in like the first week of using it, because I did exactly the same things you were doing with it. But a lot of times I just wasn't reading the documentation thoroughly as I could have. And I figured it would just be easier just to wipe the drive and just reinstall it again, because it didn't take long to install. Actually, it went rather quickly. Timmy, your turn. Tell me about your experience with Arch Linux.
My experiences have been pretty good. The first time I installed it, I had been using Ubuntu for like 2 or 3 months, I think. And that was quite a bit of a learning curve. So I decided to wait some and use a few other Linux distros. When I finally got my act together and installed Arch, like half a year ago, it was everything I'd ever asked from a Linux operating system. I really love the window managers, and they've got support for like everything you could ever want. And the openness and the availability of documentation is really great. You could just go to the Arch wiki or search the forums for about every problem that you can ever face, and it'll be there. And if you don't find anything, you just post on the forums. There'll be someone helping you. The learning curve, it's quite steep if you don't know what you're doing, but as soon as you've used Linux for a few years, some do it even sooner, but as soon as you've used Linux and know what you're doing, you should be pretty good.
Okay, now one point that was brought up while we were having our little discussion here is that Root says that rolling releases expose the user to the newest and greatest, but also exposes one to the latest and greatest exploits as well. Now, it's my understanding that everything that's going into the updates in Arch, if you're running stable, these are supposedly stable releases and that sort of thing. Now, personally, I haven't experienced any issues with any vulnerabilities on my system and that sort of thing. But has anybody else?
Not really. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure there are. I'm pretty sure what Root or Schaff said was probably true, is that a lot of crackers and exploiters and virus writers look for that latest technology to exploit and use against others. But usually in the Arch repositories, there isn't much that gets exploited, and there's not much viruses. There's no viruses in there that I've seen. So I mean, it can happen, but it's not exactly gonna happen to you instantly.
I think some of the problems may be that, as far as I'm concerned, or at least what I've heard, the packagers for Arch Linux put pretty much the default compile configurations in the repository, and unless you know what you're doing, you will probably you just install where it's in the repositories. But there is still the option to compile it by hand and maybe rewrite the source code or something. So you can eliminate some of the problems from that, but then you've really got to know what you're doing. And not a lot of users do that.
Now, the one thing I've noticed with rolling release and running bleeding edge is the fact, yes, there is some breakage. Okay, and for sake of argument, we also have exploits that are coming in, but also we're getting fixes a lot faster as well.
Yeah, that's much true. The advantages with Arch's rolling release is probably as soon as there's a bug, it usually comes in at the latest a week. At the earliest, it could be in 2 days or 1 day or within hours. So unlike many Ubuntu-based distros or anything else, fixes come very fast.
And something else I'd like to put into the mix here. For instance, the Linux kernel 3.3 has already been released, but it has not been sent to my system through synchronizing, because I did a synchronize before the show, actually, and I noticed we don't have the latest kernel. So obviously, these packages are sitting in testing for some time before they are sent into the stable branch of Arch Linux.
Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't pushed kernel 3.3 yet. It's still in the testing repository.
Alright, let's talk about something different. Alright, so one of the main things sets itself apart from many of the other distros is its package management, and that's one of the things that really defines Arch Linux in general. Pacman is the package manager we use to update, install packages, do all that kind of stuff. And it's really amazing because it's much faster and much more simple than, in my opinion, than apt-get or yum.
Absolutely, and it is so easy to use. And once you learn the command line switches and everything that go with it, I mean, you'll be asking yourself, why didn't I start using this sooner? Now, I understand that they've been trying, or there was some talk earlier in IRC that they were trying to port Pacman over to different distributions, and I think they have with Frugalware.
Yeah, I mean, just to install a package, it's like pacman-s, and then the package name, and then to update pacman syu. Really or easy package manager to use and learn.
Yeah, and also I like Yawart as well, because that allows you to access the packages that are in the user repository, and you basically just type in Yawart, and then the name of the program you want, and you don't even have to have a specific name. It'll give you a list to choose from. And you pick the one that you want, and it will compile it for you on the fly. Say goodbye to opening up a terminal and typing in make and, configure and all these other little commands. It does it for you.
Arch repositories don't actually hold everything. Now, you can enable a lot of repositories that are official from the Arch repository, like multilib for cross-platform for 32 and 64. You can enable testing repos. There are some packages that just don't make it, or the packagers don't want to throw in. That's where the AUR actually comes in. So it's kind of like a public repository where everyone can upload their own source code that people can compile and install.
Right, and that's the beauty and the beast of it at the same time. It is done by the users, maintained by the users. It's not maintained by an official governing body, so somebody could actually do something to their system that would cause havoc if you don't know what you're doing with the AUR.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you have to be careful about is now there isn't really any virus code or anything malicious in the AUR. There might be, but usually what causes problems is usually it's mostly compatibility, or something goes unstable, or something doesn't work with something, because what you're probably installing what you can install from the AUR is beta packages or alpha packages that aren't in the normal repository, so you can break your system from the AUR.
Precisely.
Yeah, so it's up to the end user to read the package builds before installing to make sure that you know where these items are being downloaded from, because it gives you the links, it gives you all the commands that are being issued before the product is being compiled, and that sort of thing.
So yeah, it's very nice. You also, there's AUR wrapper by itself can't handle and compile packages from the AUR. As much as we probably want that, it just doesn't. So in return, we have stuff like Yowert and Packer and Claude. And if you don't want to have those, you can also do it manually and download the package builds for website and do it that way too.
I think that's actually the recommended way of doing this before you get an R helper with the package build system and install them with Pacman and make package.
Yeah, that's actually how I installed Yowert, as a matter of fact, through make package.
Yeah, before you'll eventually run into some make package stuff like that, because to install Yowert or Packer or any of those AUR wrappers is you have to do it that way. You have to do it manually first, and then you can start having it automatically do it for you.
Well, they do have the Arch Linux FR repo that has Yowert already there on it, ready to go. But I always heard that it was out of date, so I just used the one that they give you from wget.
Oh yeah, wget, and that's one way you can just do that, is get it from that way.
Okay, now somebody in IRC Linux has today brought up security features that you get in Arch Linux that you don't get with Ubuntu. Who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I don't really think there's any particular features beyond them having newer packages, maybe, that fixes the bugs, and like your own knowledge about how security works. One of the things though is that as long as you know your system well enough and there's like as little merts as possible, there's like no real security threats. I don't think the default Arch install with no window manager and basically not that much communication with the outer world. So and they've got guides on their wiki about how you can harden like the TCP/IP stack and how to make your Arch install more secure. I'll throw a link in the IRC channel.
Most of it has to go off of what security you want. The Arch repositories have a vast amount of packages for security, like firewalls, proxies, stuff like it's all there. You just have to really utilize it how you need it.
Yeah, the thing is, Arch also comes with IP tables, which is really great for securing your system, and would-be hackers keeping them out and that sort of thing. And there is documentation on the Arch Wiki which covers its use and configuration. And pretty much I think all Arch systems have IP tables with it, and pretty much it's not really all that difficult to configure. I know I need to eventually get a tutorial up on it. I just haven't had an opportunity to do that. I'm using a hardware firewall here.
To start off with Arch-based distros, there aren't a whole lot like Ubuntu-based ones. I believe there's only a handful, maybe 10 or more, and many of them aren't really. Many of them have different goals, but some of them also have some familiar ones too, as well as just being live CD, easy to install.
They attempt to basically build an operating system on top of an Arch base, and basically provide their own desktop environment and features and that sort of thing. But, I kind of feel that, when you take the end user out of building their own Arch system from scratch, it takes something away.
Yeah, it does, and the whole philosophy of Arch Linux is KISS, which stands for, never mind. It's just a acronym standing for Keep It Simple, Stupid. I don't think the point of Arch is really a DIY, do-it-yourself control and build the ground up. And when you start to automate and start hiding configuration configuration and messages, Arch really just loses its main purpose.
I have tried Archbang, and I have tried Bridge Linux. I have tried Arch Herd. I have tried Liquid Lemur, and they are all very wonderful base distros. But I just don't really get the same feeling of accomplishment that, yay, I did something. I did something from absolutely almost nothing to what I get now. And I'm not comparing it with saying sitting around for 20 some odd hours compiling Gentoo. No, don't get me started on that. But as far as base distros go, yeah, they have their niche. They're for people who are come out of, say, Ubuntu or OpenSUSE, and they want to try something different. They want to try Arch. They want to experience Arch, but they don't want to take all the time and the hassle of doing it themselves. And that's great. Don't get me wrong. That really is great. But never going to experience Arch unless you experience it from the start.
I'd have to agree with you there on that one, but the thing is, a lot of people do want to have the opportunity to try out Arch before actually taking the plunge and building the system from scratch, as most people do when they're installing Arch on their system. And for me, that gateway was using Archbang. And then after playing around with Archbang for a while, then I built up that confidence enough to actually build my own Arch system.
Yeah, I mean, those distros, those live CD versions of Arch have their uses. Don't get me wrong. They're not like they're horrible and they shouldn't exist. They have their good uses, but you should really try doing it from the ground up for sure.
The only reason why I haven't put up a tutorial on installing Arch itself is because This Week in Linux, bar none, has the best tutorial online. I've seen his tutorial a number of times, and there's no way I could expand on it any better than what This Week in Linux has already done. So I actually refer people to his video tutorial on doing that, because the install procedure has not changed since he initially made that video. So that's why I figured I would do the Archbang video series, because my channel is a little bit more geared towards beginners and somewhat intermediate users that want to try something different. This has been an invigorating discussion. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in our discussion today. Thank you, Andy, Lixer, the Arch Noob, and Timmy for joining me on today's show. Plus, I'd also like to thank everybody who is listening to the show. To all of my listeners on YouTube, you can be sure to check me out every Saturday night, and all the information will be in the show notes below. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Google+, Facebook, and Twitter will keep you up to date every time I send a new video to my channel. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.